Hi, happy Friday. Yeah, this week seems to have just flown by. I'm Pamela Aaralyn, a mystic and channel of Christ consciousness and angelics and a lot of different beings that you may know and love. Thank you for being here in this practice every weekday morning between 9 and 10 Mountain Time. What we're doing is reading from A Course of Love by Mary Perron. This is a sacred text. It helps to read this text and not just read it, but connect to the being that she channeled. She channeled Jesus's words when she wrote this. And what it does, the text helps you get out of mind patterns and constructs that keep you unhappy. So it's an incredible text. I really hope that you'll love it. We're going to be stopping verse by verse to allow time for Jesus to come through, channel through me, and give any words of wisdom to help us go deeper into the Course. So we are on chapter 2, page 22, about midway through 2.8, if you're following along. It says, some others put on blinders to the world and seek only to make their corner of it more safe and secure. Some shift from one option to the next, giving up on one and hoping that the other will bring them some peace. To think that these are the only options available to creatures of a loving God is insane. He stops us here and he says, we do that in childhood to please our parents. Humans do that as you head into adulthood, perhaps to please a partner or a boss or your friends. And then you take it into spiritual practice and spiritual modality, and you use practices as boxes that you will break out of. Practices are traps. The mind is a giant trap of suffering. Therefore, you need a practice to break out of it. When it doesn't work anymore, you replace it with another practice. And when that practice doesn't work anymore, you replace it with another practice. These are safe steps for ego. It's not a bad thing to have a modality. It would be almost as if your mind is attempting to create further insanity for you to say that it's okay to have none. The mind needs something different than what it is currently doing if you want to feel better. The mind will also convince you and say, this practice isn't good enough. I don't resonate with that one. Stop here, don't do anything different. Let's get something else. And the mind will also say, I don't even need one. You know, if I'm God anyway, I don't need one. But what if I am God? It's just another step in the journey. What's beyond that? If God is also a human construct. What is beyond? When you think you are, if you say I am, is there something beyond that? Keep growing, because when you stop, the mind has won and your suffering will resume immediately. This course causes you to go from one box to another safely until you give up on boxes. It's okay if that happens immediately. It's okay if that takes the rest of your lives. Time matters not in this. What matters is your realization of love so that you can feel peaceful. You can feel the contentment that you are. And then you can continue to be helpful for those who don't feel. Okay. The rest of this verse says, given even your limited view of who you are, could this really be true? And he stops and says, that's the question to ask yourselves. Let no one else ask you. And don't answer to them. Only you can ask, and only you can answer. Okay. 2.9 says, the insanity of your thought process and the world you perceive must be made known to you before you are willing to give it up. He stops us and says, so here is a modality. Here is a box to put around you for safety until you break out of it again, until you want another. The only thing you need to do is observe the neurosis of the mind. You cannot make it change or tell ego to be different. It doesn't know different. You can only observe what isn't working. Observe all of the neuroses around it. Observe the pain that occurs. And when you're ready, you'll be able to shift because of the breath flowing effortlessly. And when you are focused on the breath, it is the mechanism that opens you to the awareness of the Christed energy within you. And ego will fight that too and say, stop. That might kill me. That might not feel well. That might not be safe. Don't confuse your neuroses caused by an overwhelmed neurological system with the true voice of spirit, and then say it's your intuition guiding you against a practice. You need a practice until the day that you don't. But even that day that you don't, and ego says, okay, now I don't, question that voice too. And observe. If there are still cycles of pain, you will still need a practice. But the first practice is simply to observe what isn't working. Just learn from it. All right, the rest of 2.9 says, you do know this, and yet you continually forget. This forgetting is the work of your ego. Your true self does not want to forget, and cannot even for the tiniest fraction of a second. It is precisely the inability of your true self to forget that gives you hope of learning to recognize love, and with that recognition, of ending the insanity you now perceive. 2.10 says, your real self is the Christ in you. How could it be anything but love, or see with eyes other than those of love? Would you expect any decent human being to look on a loveless world, on misery and despair, and not be moved? Think not that those who seem to add to the world's misery are any exception. There is not a soul that walks this earth that does not weep at what it sees. Yet the Christ in you does not weep, for the Christ in you sees with eyes of love. The difference is the eyes of love see not the misery or despair. They're not there. This is the miracle. The miracle is true seeing. Think not that love can look on misery and see love there. Love looks not on misery at all. He stops us here and says, can you perceive that when you look upon pain in the world, you simply have believed your own painful judgments from mind? It doesn't make it true or not. It only makes it painful or not. It doesn't make it loving or not. There is a deeper love behind everything that the ego has judged as misery, and the Christed mind will find it if she is looking. Keep looking. Okay, let's see, where are we? Oh yeah, 2.11. Compassion is not what you have made of it. The Bible instructs you to be compassionate as God is compassionate. You have to find it, unlike the compassion of God. To believe God looks upon misery and responds with sympathy and concern does not end the misery. Is to believe in a God who is compassionate as you are compassionate. You think you would end misery if you could, beginning with your own, and yet you could no more end misery by making it real than could God. There is no magic here of turning misery into delight and pain into joy. These acts would indeed be magic, an illusion on top of an illusion. You have but accepted illusion as the truth, and so seek other illusions to change what never was into something that never will be. He stops us here and nods a bit and he says it's just like a magic trick of the mind to say that a miracle is going to erase the pain. Pain is your reaction, not God's. Suffering is your choice, not God's. And the world is for you, not God. You, as children of God, continued to assist throughout the construct of time to create the world with all of the angelic beings. You may call them what you will. The beings that helped you in your will, your Christed will, to create the freedom of choice and then suffer from it. You, along with these beings, created this world. And when the pain occurs that you create from your choice, you turn to God and say, why? If you created the world, why? And now I say to you today, this is not God's world. This is your dream, your world. Okay, 2.12 says, to be compassionate as God is compassionate is to see as God sees. Again, I stress to you, this is not about looking upon misery and saying to yourself, you see it not. I am not an advocate of heartlessness, but wholeheartedness. If you believe even the tiniest fraction of what is true, if you but believe you are a small part of God, no bigger than a pinprick of light in a daunting sun, you still cannot believe in the reality of misery and despair. If you do, you believe this is the state of God as well. And if this were true, what hope would there be for misery's end? What light would there be in the universe that could end the darkness? 2.13 says, reverse this thought and see if it makes any more sense than it did before. In this scenario, benevolent and loving God, who has extended its being into the creation of the universe, has somehow managed to extend what is not of him, to create what is unlike to his being in every way. Jesus stops us and says, you're going to ask why, aren't you? It's because for God so loved the world. That's what that verse means. You created a concept of salvation from your own suffering, not because anything is wrong, but because you have created so much pain that you require the remembering of divine love and the perception of divine assistance. Continuing on in 2.13, it says, would you even attempt such folly? Would you conceive of the inconceivable? 2.14 says, what answer then is left but that you do not see reality for what it is? What benefit is left to you in seeing incorrectly? What risk in attempting to see anew? What would a love without misery be but heaven? 2.15, look not to figures from the past to show you the way beyond illusions to the present. Look within to the one in you who knows the way. Christ is within you, and you rest within God. I vow to never leave you, and to never leave you comfortless. The Holy Spirit has brought what comfort you would accept to your troubled mind. Now turn to me to comfort your troubled heart. He stops and says, the comfort is the beloved. It is the essence of all that is and isn't outside of time, yet you can still feel and call upon it inside of time. That is the divine assistance, is spirit. I love you. Guys, don't forget today I'm channeling Jesus at 1 p.m. in trance channeling for about an hour and a half over on patreon.com/Pamela Aaralyn. I hope to see you there. Have a great weekend. Bye.